Well, hello from Berlin. I'm glad to see that you all have joined me for my little talk today. And have you noticed it's daylight outside? Usually I save these little recordings for, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm at my very best. But today I decided to do something a little different and I went to bed early and I got up relatively early and I'm making this video for you. Now, I've tried to do this like 17 times already, and my allergies kept like acting up, and I was all choked up and coughing and stuff. So I deleted all of those that are insane, and hopefully this one is the one that will stick. So fingers crossed. Now, I have to tell you, my immediate impression of Berlin is that this is a place I definitely want to come back and spend some real time in. I really like Berlin. I like the vibe of the city. I like the options of things to do, the pace, the people are not super friendly, but they're not unfriendly. It's not like the US where everybody wants to strike up a conversation with you, but they're also not rude or impolite, which I appreciate. And almost everyone speaks some English. So all of those things kind of working together, I think Berlin is a place that I want to come back and visit and maybe stay for an extended time. So, what has my time been like here so far? Well, first of all, this is the first place that I've stayed in Europe by myself that was not an Airbnb. All of the other times that I've traveled by myself, I've stayed in apartments that I've rented from people who live here. This actually is a hotel. I'm coming to you from the Holiday Inn Express City Center West in Berlin. Now, you might wonder why I did that, since it's obvious that I prefer Airbnbs, that I prefer apartments. And I prefer them because I really like being able to wash my clothes. Most of them have washing machines. I like having a place to sit that isn't the bed. Like if I want to spend the afternoon indoors or if I want to stay up late, it's nice to have a place to sit and read or watch television and not have to be actually on my bed the whole time. And I like the option of being able to store some of my own food, like for breakfast or snacks or whatever. But when I began looking at Airbnbs for Berlin, I couldn't find any that were both in my budget, in my price range, and that were close to the city center. A lot of the Airbnbs that I saw for Berlin were very much outside the city, and I had kind of an idea of how big Berlin is, but really I underestimated that quite a bit. Berlin is very large, and I wouldn't have wanted to be way out of the city center because that would have made transportation more difficult. So ultimately, I chose to stay at this Holiday Inn Express because I got a pretty good buy. I think there was a sale on hotels.com, and I want to say it ended up being about $85 a night, which is certainly cheaper than what I can get in the US. And it also allowed me to earn credit toward free nights on hotels.com. So I was like, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal when you look at the price plus the chance to earn reward nights. I'm staying here for 6 nights, and I honestly have not pushed myself to do tons and tons of things in the city. I've been taking it kind of easy. The first couple of days, for example, I didn't really do much but hang out with a scrap gal named Elena. She's from Bologna, Italy, but she lived and worked in Berlin for her company for 6 months to a year, I forget how long, and she actually came to visit some friends in the city and made some time to visit me too. This lovely scarf that I'm wearing came from Elena, so thank you very much, my little Italian treat there. And we had a great time. We didn't do a whole lot. We walked around the city and kind of explored some things. We chatted forever, and we had 4 and 5 hour meals because that's how we roll. It's one of the things I love about Europe is that getting together for a meal with friends is an evening long adventure. Our first night that I was here, we met up and we met up at Alexanderplatz, which is quite busy, And it was funny because I had messaged her and I said, I'm wearing, such and such. Like, I was worried she wouldn't be able to pick me out of the crowd, kind of like, a first date or whatever. And she saw me right away, even though I was late. I underestimated the traffic time with public transportation, and then I got turned around and I had to get off and get on a different train. So, yeah, user error is my fault. So even though I was running late, she waited for me and we walked to a really nice restaurant, and it served traditional German food. Its specialty was ribs. Now, even though I'm from the South, ribs are not my favorite thing because a lot of people don't cook them well, first of all. And I don't really like meat that still has the bone in it. I prefer boneless cuts. And so I was pleasantly surprised when I got my meal and the ribs were boneless. They'd already taken the meat off of them. But it tasted like country ham is the closest thing I can like connect it to, like baked country ham from the South in the U.S. So I enjoyed every minute of it. And the potato, I think it was like a potato salad, was awesome. The creamed spinach, not so much, but I ate some because, it's the right thing to do. But anyway, we sat and talked for like 5 hours, and we had dessert, and it was just absolutely lovely. Now, the next day, my fingers were all swollen because I guess the ham had a lot of salt in it and that kind of thing, like country ham does at home. But it was totally worth it. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I would recommend it. I'll have to find the receipt or something and try to figure out the name of that place. I've forgotten it now. The next day, we got together again in the afternoon that time because she had plans with her friends that evening. And we went to this Russian place for lunch. And it was, oh my God, it was so good. We had like a 4-course meal for, I think, like 22 euros or something. That's the only meal that I ate that day because it was so big. But we had, let's see, there was an appetizer that was like, it was like a menu of the day, and there were 4 or 5 that you could choose from. And I got the same one that Elena did. We got the vegetarian option. But the first course was like kind of like an avocado bruschetta on a toast. It was very, very good. And then we had borscht, which I had never had before. And I have to be honest, I was a little reluctant because I don't know that I really like beets. I generally just avoid them. And there is something kind of strange about eating red soup. It feels like maybe you're eating blood or something. I know that's like totally in my head. But actually, I really liked it. The only thing I would say is that it was just lukewarm. And I don't know if that is the way borscht is supposed to be served or not. But I probably would have enjoyed it more if it had been piping hot. And it had a little more sour cream in it. But I ate it, of course. Then our main course was, they were dumplings. They reminded me a little bit of like gnocchi, I guess. And so they were filled with different things. One of them had like a spinach and cheese filling that reminded me a lot of, say, Greek food. Another one had a sheep's milk cheese, which was very different and very good. I liked that a lot. It was very rich. And then the last one was kind of the one that was expected. It was filled with like mashed potatoes and cheese, and it was really good. So I enjoyed the gnocchi. And then for dessert, we had it's some famous Russian cake, but it reminded me a lot of like maybe tiramisu or an Italian cream cake. So, that would be the closest thing that I could connect it to. It was cold, and I really enjoyed it. So, of course, at that point, I was ready to go home and take a nap. I mean, I wasn't in the mood to set the world on fire. But we went for a walk and saw some different things in the city, so that was really nice. And honestly, getting to meet Scrap Gals has been one of the best things, if not the best thing, about my travels this summer. I mean, I've met a handful of people that I would probably never have had the opportunity to meet and without the podcast and that sort of thing. And, we hung out and talked about everything from our lives, to politics, to scrapbooking, to being creative, to our families and friends. I mean, it's really nice to be able to connect with people like that in a way that I never thought that I would. So I feel really lucky that that is something that I've been able to do in so many of the cities that I've visited so far. I don't know if you can hear out the window or not, but apparently it's like recycling day or something, and somebody is throwing huge boxes of glass bottles. So, sorry for that. That's kind of, I guess, part of being in a big city. Well, anyway, another thing I wanted to mention about Berlin that has been a little bit surprising has been the weather. Now, it's July, and you'll notice I have on a scarf. Now, before I started my little video, I took my sweater off and my raincoat because this morning it has been raining in Berlin, which in and of itself is not that unusual, but the temperatures have really surprised me. The high in Berlin since I've been here has not been above like a 72. The lows have been in the low 50s, and it's been drizzly a couple of different days. It's been windy every single day, like as windy as Chicago is. I've only been there once, so I don't have a whole lot to measure that by, but like super windy. And so when it's chilly and it's a little bit damp and the wind is blowing, you're going to freeze if you're not prepared. So I've gone out more than once with like almost every piece of clothing on that I thought would help give me some layers, like leggings and a dress and a scarf and a sweater and a jacket or a second sweater. It's been a little bit crazy. And the day that I went to lunch with Elena at that Russian place, I about froze to death because, I mean, given the choice, I always want to eat outside, always. And I was just a little bit unprepared for some of the weather. So how do you deal with that, right? So the first thing is a lot of the restaurants have lap blankets that they, keep on the chairs for you to use while you're sitting there and eating outdoors. So you can at least cover your legs with a little extra something. And I guess if they weren't busy and you wanted to use another lap blanket, you could ask for a second one to wrap around you. But that's one thing that you can take into consideration. Of course, you can always eat inside too, but I'm kind of the mindset that if I'm in Europe and you're able to eat outside, then I think you probably should. And then the other thing that I've done is I've done a little bit of shopping. I went to Primark. I don't know if you all are familiar with it or not, but it's a store that I actually found last year when I spent the summer in Madrid. And they're kind of like a European version of Old Navy. The stuff isn't very expensive, but you also don't expect it to last forever, right? So I went into Primark and I bought a couple of pairs of leggings and a couple of long sleeve t-shirts, and I bought a little raincoat because I was like, I need a little extra something to protect me from the wind and the dampness. And I like Primark quite a bit. I'm not expecting these pieces to last forever or anything, but if they last me until I get home, then I think that they've been worth it. And I just continue to kind of layer and put things together as best I can. When I look at the weather forecast for the next few cities, it looks like it's going to remain pretty chilly until maybe my last city, Paris, and then it's going to be warmer. So, I'm glad I packed 3 pairs of pants because I almost didn't bring any. Wouldn't that have been horrible? I'm glad I have some leggings. I'm thankful that I have some layers and some scarves and things that can help me stay a little bit warmer. It does also look like I'm going to have quite a bit of rain in the coming days, but something that I've noticed thus far is that it usually doesn't rain all day and in buckets the way that it does at home. It just rains for a little while, or it's maybe a light drizzle all day long. So I can deal with those things. I mean, certainly they add a little bit of adventure to the whole travel experience. But that's why, I raked out that $3 for that fancy Target umbrella so that I could use it. I can feel vindicated that I've actually used that this trip instead of just carried it around with me for nothing. So, what have I seen in Berlin? And I have to be honest, I haven't seen a whole lot. I mean, I told you I haven't really pushed myself. I've stayed up late and that kind of thing, but it's because once I get back to my well, not my apartment, my hotel room. Once I get back to my hotel room, I'm thinking about what I did for the day, or I'm planning for the next day, and sometimes it's hard to kind of get settled. I also use that time to talk to Kelsey, or to talk to the fella, or to catch up on email, or pay bills, or all of those things that, you still have to do even when you're traveling. So, I've been to a couple of museums. I went to the DDR museum, which was really, really interesting, and I would recommend it to anybody who is traveling to Berlin. The DDR is the name of the German state when it was under Soviet control during the Cold War. And so the DDR museum is kind of a peek into what life was like behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. And it focuses on the lives of people who lived in East Berlin, and in particular, people who, were so surprised when the Soviets put up the Berlin Wall within a 56-hour period with absolutely no warning. And what I loved about the museum is that it was very interactive. This would be a great place to bring kids, maybe as young as age 10 or 12, because there are cabinets to open and to look and see. There is a life-size model of an apartment, and what your bedroom would have looked like, what your living room looked like. The furniture is there and everything. There are exhibits where you can touch the uniforms, or you can touch the clothing from the time period. There's an interrogation room where you can go in and sit down across from your interrogator. There's a prison cell that you can go in and even, like sit on the cot of the prison cell. I mean, it's very interactive. The only reason I would say maybe not kids younger than 10 or 12 is there are some photographs of nudity. There was, they highlighted like different careers in the Soviet bloc during that time, and it showed like how much you got paid and what the tools of your trade would be. And one of them was like an engineer or factory worker or something, and I opened the locker and it had all of these porn magazine like layouts. And I was like, well, there you go. Which it didn't offend me. It just surprised me a little bit, because there were so many kids in the museum. And then I walked around and finally got to the section on like taking vacations, and how when you lived in a Soviet bloc country, you could only vacation to other, Soviet controlled states. And there was this whole wall of like photographs from this era, and kind of their obsession with nude sunbathing, and there were lots and lots of photographs of full frontal nudity of both sexes. And so that would be something that I would say, if you are bringing children to the museum, to like be aware of, and maybe prepare them for that, or steer them gently away from that section. But it was interesting because there were a lot of teenagers there who were like on a school trip and stuff, and I expected them to be kind of ridiculous at that section, but it was really not a big deal. So maybe that's the American in me showing that I think maybe kids wouldn't be able to handle that display, because they were very blasé about it. They didn't seem to think it was shocking at all. There are also some photographs of warfare, and some photographs of executions and that kind of thing that might be really disturbing to kids younger than 10 or so. So that would be just, something to be aware of before you would, bring the family to it. But it really was very well done. I thought it did a great job of kind of portraying what life would have been like in East Germany from about 1953 to 1989, and it was interesting to see how there were some things that they did pretty well, And then there were a lot of things where they really fell short. One of the most interesting parts that I recall is the section on kindergarten, because there was a kindergarten classroom set up that looked a lot like the kindergarten that I attended in 1976, you know? So it's kind of crazy that we adopted maybe the German model for kindergarten, even though, you know, we have professed not to approve of the kinds of indoctrination that happened in that time period. One of the things that shocked me, though, is that these people, like, for childcare, they potty trained children in groups. Like, you had to, everybody sat on kind of a bench that was a potty chair, and nobody could get up until everybody had gone. I mean, talk about like instilling fear about going to the bathroom. If any of you all are moms and you've potty trained, I mean, can you imagine having to do that with like a group of 20 kids? That's like my worst nightmare. But anyway, something else that I did since I have been in Berlin is I went to the Pergamon Museum, which focuses on antiquities from the Middle and Far East. It has a lot of like giant stone sculptures and has city gates and these beautiful mosaic pieces and these huge, you know, wall friezes that are absolutely gorgeous. I spent about 3 hours there just kind of wandering around and taking pictures, and I was really impressed by the collection. Now, there were a handful of rooms that were closed because they're working on some restoration and they're remodeling and renovating part of the museum, so I didn't get to see everything that it's famous for. For example, I didn't get to see the bust of Nefertiti, which is like one of their claims to fame. But I did get to see some amazing things, and it's a museum that I would actually visit again. If I were here for an extended period of time, I would go and I would spend some more time there. They also offer, for anyone who is interested in coming to Berlin, they offer a museum pass that's good for all of the museums on Museum Island, and then they offer both like a multi-day pass and a yearly pass. And quite honestly, if I were going to be here for several weeks, I would probably go ahead and do the year pass, because it gives you entrance to like 20 museums or something for one price for an entire year. And so that would be a really good deal if you were going to spend some extended time in the city. As it was, I just paid for those things individually. I took a walking tour with Sandemann's, one of the free walking tours where you just tip, you know, when you're finished. And it was pretty interesting. We did some of the big things. We went to the Holocaust Memorial. We went to the Brandenburg Gate. We saw the site of Hitler's bunker, which is now a parking lot where people walk their dogs. We went to Checkpoint Charlie. We saw the Berlin Wall. Oh gosh, I mean, there are so many things that we did. We saw the site of the attempted uprising in the late 50s that was shut down pretty brutally by the Soviet military. We, gosh, I mean, I know we saw more than that, but it all starts to kind of run together. So that was a pretty good way to spend our time, I thought. Yesterday, I did some exploring in the city. I went to Friedrichstrasse and kind of the Upper West Side or Upper East Side. I don't know, the fancy schmancy side of Berlin. And I went to a couple of cool bookstores. You know, but really I've just allowed myself the opportunity to wander around the city and get to know its places and its people a little bit, because again, I think this is a place that I'll want to come back and visit again. So what's on tap? Well, Tonya arrives later today, And she and I are going to have a couple of days here in the city before we head on over to Amsterdam. I'm super excited about getting to see a few things with her. I've left a few things like off my list that I still want to see because I wanted to be able to see them with her kind of with fresh eyes. So that should be really fun. I don't know yet what she'll be up to that first day because she'll be jet lagged, but we will have one whole day where we can just kind of explore the city. I have to say, the people here in Berlin, almost everyone speaks some English, and generally people are busy and unconcerned about you, but polite. And I know that's kind of hard to like reconcile, particularly if you're from the States, but they just aren't very interested in what you're doing and who you are and why you're here, which is totally fine. I think that may be a German thing, but it also just may be a big city thing. Everybody's, worried about their own selves, not about other people. And but I have to say that in general, people have been polite and willing to answer my questions if I have them. I mean, certainly you're not going to get the same kind of service maybe that we're used to in the U.S. Remember, Europe is not the place where the customer is always right, or that service is the highest on the list. But in general, I think I've been treated fairly, and I think that that's good. And prices are decent. I'm not spending a ton of money on things that are necessary. I mean, food is relatively a fair price. You can pretty much eat for almost any budget. Drinks are a little more expensive here than they are in other places that I've visited, but that doesn't surprise me because, again, we're moving more towards Western Europe, and I think prices are a little more expensive the further west that you go, at least in my experience. Transportation is super varied. Like, you can ride the bus, you can ride the tram, you can ride the S-Bahn, the D-Bahn, or the U-Bahn, which are all like variations on a metro system. And I've gotten turned around a time or two, but the Germans are pretty efficient in the way that they approach transportation and timetables and that kind of thing. So once you figure out the legend of the transportation map, then I think it's pretty easy to figure out, where you're going and how to get there. So I've had good luck there. And, knock on wood, but I've felt really safe and not at all worried, even when I've been out past midnight on dark streets by myself. And, that's not something that I do a lot, but I guess maybe I'm getting a little bit braver and, and I'm just staying out later. I don't know. Maybe it's just part of the vibe of this city in particular. So I need to cut things short today because Tonya just texted that she has landed, and I'm going to head down to the lobby of the hotel to wait for her to arrive. I'll try to get this uploaded today so that it is a little bit more relevant. It's in the moment, but I hope that you all will continue to follow along on Instagram and Facebook with the pictures that I'm posting every day, and that you'll leave me a comment or ask a question here on the video. I always love it when I get some feedback. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get back to you, but I have to say it's one of my favorite things when people leave me a comment or a little bit of encouragement or something, because it's like, okay, I should keep making the videos. Somebody's watching. It matters. All right, well, until I talk to you next time, hopefully from Amsterdam, I hope that you're having a great summer, that you're enjoying some time with your friends and family, and that you're finding a little bit of time for your crafty side too. Talk soon. Bye-bye.